Charax Spasinou. In a world where rivers wander, empires rise, and Alexander the Great names everything after himself, one city disappeared for 2 millennia, until now. Ancient writers claim that when Alexander the Great strutted back into Mesopotamia from the Indus Valley around 324 BC, he decided, you know what this place needs? Another Alexandria. Because apparently the man had a personal quota of cities named after himself. This one was called Alexandria on the Tigris, and for centuries archaeologists had absolutely no idea where it was. Truly the lost keys of ancient urban planning. Ancient authors also mentioned a place called Charax Spasinou, and scholars spent decades arguing about where exactly it was. Can you imagine a bunch of academics fighting over a map, like it's the last slice of pizza? In the 1960s, British researcher John Hansman looked at Royal Air Force aerial photos and spotted a giant walled enclosure. He was basically doing Google Earth archaeology before Google Earth existed. But then research stalled because the Iraq-Iran border turned into a war zone, and then the military built installations right on top of the ruins, because of course they did. Fast forward to modern times, archaeologists in southern Iraq have finally located the place, and surprise, surprise, it's been sitting at Jebel Kayabur, right near the Iran border, just chilling under everyone's noses. Turns out it was once a massive port city, strategically placed to connect Mesopotamian river traffic with Persian Gulf Sea routes and trade networks stretching all the way to India and Central Asia. Like a modern-day Dubai airport, but with fewer delays and significantly more spearheads. Then, in 2014, archaeologists finally returned. Local heritage officials guided them to what looked like a random low ridge in a flat landscape, except it wasn't a ridge. It was a gigantic city wall over 1 kilometre long and up to 8 metres high. You know, just a casual megastructure hiding in plain sight. No big deal. Researchers then surveyed more than 500 square kilometres on foot, which, frankly, is a level of cardio I personally find quite offensive. They recorded dense scatters of pottery, bricks, and industrial debris. Thousands of drone photos helped build a detailed terrain model, and magnetometer surveys revealed buried structures. The results show a city laid out on a grid with wide streets, huge housing blocks, temples, workshops, canals, and harbour basins. One district even has house blocks so large they make other cities of the area look like they were built by people who just couldn't bother be waking up. Street alignments reveal 4 different grid orientations, meaning the city went through multiple building phases. Residential areas sit next to religious buildings, industrial zones cluster near old waterways, and one enclosed area with no streets at all is likely a palace or garden complex, because nothing says royalty like a giant walled-off zone where poor people aren't allowed to walk. Satellite imagery also shows canals feeding agricultural fields north of the city, which would have supported a hefty population. Historically, the city mattered because between 300 BC and 300 AD, long-distance trade across the Indian Ocean and Central Asia exploded. Spices, textiles, gemstones, metals, all the good stuff, flowed toward Mesopotamian megacities like Seleucia and Persepolis. These places had populations in the hundreds of thousands, which is wild considering they didn't even have air conditioning. A port sitting at the crossroads of sea and river routes was the perfect spot to funnel all that trade. Alexandria on the Tigris was basically the Amazon fulfillment centre of its day, but with fewer cardboard boxes and more camels. Over the course of its life, the city changed hands and then changed name more than once. Just 1 year after passing through the area, Alexander the Great died, and almost immediately his empire fractured into 3 separate empires, each one ruled by one of Alexander's former generals. Alexandria on the Tigris fell into the hands of the Seleucid Empire, who didn't wait too long before renaming the city to Antiochus in Susiana. The Seleucids had the same addictive naming fever as Alexander, and renaming Alexander's cities after themselves almost became a hobby in itself. Roll on another 200 years or so, and the great Seleucid Empire started to fall apart. By the 2nd century BC, the Seleucids were basically the ancient world's version of a country with 12 prime ministers in 5 years. Civil wars, rebellions, and general chaos meant their control over the Persian Gulf region was, let's say, aspirational, and this created a power vacuum. Enter stage left another great man, this one named Hyspaosines, and let's all just pretend I absolutely nailed the pronunciation of this name, which I doubt. Anyway, Hyspaosines, or whatever his name was, he wasn't just some random warlord. He had originally been appointed as a governor-administrator of the region around the Persian Gulf, so at first he was working for the Seleucids. Around 135 BC, Hyspaosines took advantage of the Seleucid meltdown and declared himself king. He didn't need a massive battle, because he already controlled the region administratively. It was more like, the empire is falling, nobody's watching, and I already have the keys, so I guess I'm king now. It was also around about this time that nature came calling, as it tends to do, and the great city was severely flooded, putting a bit of a dampener on the party, every pun intended. But this was a great opportunity for the new king to show his leadership skills. Hyspaosines rebuilt the city and then also decided to rename it to Charax Spasinou. Charax being the Greek word for a palisaded fort or embankment, while the Spasinou suffix came from the new king's name, so that the new name of the city, Charax Spasinou, literally means the fortress of Hyspaosines. Because if you rebuild a city from scratch, you get the naming rights. That's just the rule. And at this, Hyspaosines declared independence from the Seleucids and kicked off his own little kingdom, which historians now call the Kingdom of Characene. And Charax Spasinou became its capital, the beating heart of his shiny new state. This wasn't a massive empire like the Seleucids or Parthians. Think of it more like a very ambitious coastal startup with excellent trade revenue. But it was a real kingdom with its own rulers, coinage, and foreign policy. Unfortunately for this new king and his new kingdom, however, their timing wasn't exactly the best. The Parthian Empire rose to power in the 3rd to 2nd century BC and started expanding westward into Mesopotamia. By the time Hyspaosines declared himself king, the Parthians were already the new regional superpower. So the moment he founded his kingdom, he basically had a giant Parthian supervisor looming over his shoulder. Hyspaosines ruled Characene semi-independently. He was technically a king, but in practice he had to play nice with the Parthians. Think of him as a regional manager who printed his own business cards. After Hyspaosines died, the Parthians tightened control. His successors were basically Parthian-approved puppet kings. They still ruled Characene, but only with Parthian blessing. And just like that, Charax Spasinou became the capital of a Parthian vassal state. Not conquered, not destroyed, just absorbed into the Parthian sphere like a small planet orbiting a very large sun. Charax Spasinou kept its kings, its trade, and its wealth, but the Parthians controlled foreign policy, military oversight, and succession. It was basically the ancient version of being independent while living in your parents' basement. And with this city under their control, the Parthians gained lucrative trade wealth and access to the Persian Gulf. The Parthians controlled the city for the next 300 years, from roughly 130 BC to 220 AD, or around the same time as the birth of your mother-in-law. Charax Spasinou lived under Parthian influence. But then nature did what nature does best: ruin everything. Rivers in southern Mesopotamia loved to wander around like bored toddlers, and the Persian Gulf shoreline kept creeping south thanks to sediment buildup. By the 3rd century AD, the Tigris had shifted west, the harbour lost access to the main channel, and the coastline wandered off into the distance. River shipping tanked, the economy collapsed, and people pieced out. Urban life faded, leaving behind a ghost city that would confuse archaeologists for centuries. Also at around this same time, the Parthian Empire was also on its way out, soon to be replaced by the new big boys in the area, the Sasanians. In the 220s, the Parthian Empire collapsed, and Ardashir I, founder of the Sasanian dynasty, started conquering everything in sight. In the year 222, he arrived at the kingdom of Characene and immediately conquered the region, marking the end of the kingdom of Characene. Charax Spasinou became a Sasanian provincial town, but it's not the thriving port city it used to be, because the river had already abandoned it. By this point in history, the Tigris had shifted so far west that Charax was no longer a port at all. Its entire economic purpose evaporated. So when the Sasanians took it, they basically inherited a once great port city that now had the same waterfront access as a desert. The Sasanians didn't destroy Charax Spasinou because nature already had. Charax Spasinou slowly shrank into a sad little desert town before eventually being abandoned entirely. So thoroughly, in fact, that it stayed buried for almost 2,000 years until archaeologists rediscovered it with drones. Today, work at Jebel Kebair is filling in a huge gap in Mesopotamian history, especially for periods with few written records. Ongoing digs aim to refine the city plan, date construction phases, and understand how trade and environmental change shaped its rise and fall. Excavations will happen when funding and field conditions cooperate, which in archaeology is basically the equivalent of waiting for planets to align. And so, in a world where rivers changed their minds, empires collapsed on Tuesdays, and Alexander the Great named every city after himself, one ancient city rose, thrived, and then vanished for nearly 2,000 years. Not because of war, not because of plague, but because the Tigris River literally walked away, or ran, because that's just what rivers do. So, fine ladies and finer gentlemen, what lessons can we take away from today's wee video? Well, for one, don't build your entire economy around a river that has commitment issues. The Tigris literally woke up one morning, said, "I'm bored," and then wandered off like a cat that found a better box. Charax Spasinou didn't collapse, it got dumped by geography. But also, let this be a reminder that it's okay to blame Mother Nature for your shortcomings if you want to. It worked for the Persian Gulf, so it can work for you too. Secondly, archaeologists will eventually find everything you try to hide. You can bury it, abandon it, pave over it, or build a military base on top of it. But never underestimate what archaeologists can accomplish when they're bored and have a magnetometer. They will map your entire city before lunch. And last but not least, always diversify your trade routes. Because the river moved is not a great business plan, neither is it a great excuse. If you've been paying attention to this video series so far, then you will know that if anything, shifting rivers are to be expected. Life do be like that sometimes. Now, one last thing before we go. Do not forget to keep your eyes glued to the screen, for this is where you will see the names of planet Earth's greatest Patreons. And while you're at it, ask yourself, why aren't you one of them? Like and subscribe, or else I'll rename your mother to Alexandria between the legs. Peace, love, and Charax Spasinou. Goodbye.